Hello and welcome to the Next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
And my name's Kevin Appleby. So Graham, good friend of mine as a guest this morning, Susana Serrano-Davey. Now, Susana's one of our Grow CFO mentors, and she's done something we talk an awful lot about on this podcast, and that's write a book.
Well, what's the book called, first of all, Susana?
The book is called I Wish I Had Known. And hello, by the way.
Good morning. We've really botched that first bit up, but don't worry about that. We'll carry on anyway, regardless.
We're professionals.
So what was it again? Well, the book was called
I Wish I Had Known.
I wish I had known. Well, I wish I had known how that first bit was going to go. But so, what's the purpose of the book? What problem does it address?
So it addresses the problems that a lot of professionals in the workplace have, especially earlier in our careers when we're a little bit lost, we're insecure, we don't know how to tackle certain challenges. Those things that over time we think, oh my God, if I had known about this, I would have saved a lot of grief. So the book is my way of sharing a lot of those insights and also mentoring people that perhaps don't have access to being mentored through their company or privately.
So is that how you get through the day? You basically mentor people just generally as a coach? Yes,
that's one of the things I do. Yes, I do.
Is it a life coach or is it a little bit more business oriented?
No, it is. You've hit the nail in the head, Graham, because I have developed my own method of mentoring, and it does both. Because when I started mentoring, it was very much about the business and the job. But whenever you sort of scratch under the surface, behind every challenge that we find at work, there is something personal behind.
Of course.
And so I do always try and cover in my mentoring process both sides. And the book, in fact, and that's one of the things that I think makes it very different compared to other publications of its type, is that the first half is all about how to succeed in the workplace, how to make an impact, how to be assertive, how to get on with our jobs and do well. Yeah. But the second half is about all of that is very good, but actually, are you paying attention to yourself, to your needs as a person, and all those things that perhaps earlier in our career, because we're young, we tend to overlook. And as we start to get grey hairs and pain in our shoulders and things like that, we come to appreciate and realise.
Well, my hair's just left me, so I don't have much grey. It's just a large parting. But you've obviously known Kevin for a little while. I mean, you can reveal to us all, have you actually coached him in any way at all?
Well, I think we coach each other on our podcast where we have a lot of fun. I haven't formally, formally, but I think we're all learning from every conversation that we have.
And to be honest, I don't know where you'd start with Kevin, because I mean, so many layers, a bit like an onion.
Well, Kevin, wasn't that one of the metaphors we used in one of the podcasts that we recorded about self-awareness?
I think it was, yes, because as you've been writing this book, Susana, we've recorded several podcasts as certain subjects have been top of your mind, and it's been really interesting doing it. So I kind of feel as though I've read the book without ever seeing a copy of it.
Oh, you will. You wait and see. There's a lot more than we've had the chance to discuss behind those pages.
And do I get this right? But I mean, first of all, you're talking to us in another language from your own language, but because you're Spanish, aren't you?
I am
birth. So whereabouts were you born in Spain?
In Cadiz. I don't know if you know the little tip at the bottom of Spain.
We'd say Cadiz, but I mean, you say Cadiz sort of thing, don't you? So yes.
Cadiz, so that you understand.
Cadiz. Okay, fine. But
my son-in-law, who's a French teacher, tells me often I say Z in Spanish. Now, players that have played for us, managers that have managed us, there's Rafa Benitez. Eote Perez.
No, I was taught that by a dear friend who's no longer with us, but he was a friend from Madrid, and so basically we kind of got to know how to pronounce Madrid. So he was one of the Renaissance men of Spain. He was just an unbelievable person. But a story for another day, I'm sure. But I have a deep sort of care for the Spanish and what they do, except when they play football against us. That's when it's a bit awkward then. But you still live there then? You're talking to us from Spain.
I am at the moment, but I've spent my life coming and going to and from the UK. I actually didn't go to England until I was 21 for the first time. And at that time, I didn't speak English. In fact, the first visit I had, funnily enough, I said to the friend that I'd gone to visit, I said, Janet, I really loved your country, but I couldn't possibly live here. And 18 months later, I arrived to stay for what it then became most of my adult life. I've spent overall 18 years in the UK working and living. So I'm a little bit of a, as you would say in Spanish, mejunje, which is like a mix, a little like a mixed bag.
Yes, a bit like Kevin and I, really, I suppose. But
that early UK career, then, Susana, must be the part of your career that a lot of this book's based on, the experiences that you had then. So tell us a little bit about that early time in the UK. What were you doing? What were you learning?
I suppose yes, the book does reflect a lot of my overall experiences. But when I look back at that time of my life, I think that the thing that strikes is at that point, I had no self-belief. I had no confidence. I had a lot of opportunities around me. But I just I didn't think I had it in me. And yet over those years, I proved to myself and those around me, which sometimes is what we need, is to build that evidence in front of ourselves to have that belief. And when I arrived in England, I didn't speak English. So I went to college just to learn English. And one thing led to the other. And then I ended up going to university and getting what I'm really proud of. I'm going to boast here, so do forgive me. I got a first-class honours degree, having had 2 kids along the way. Wow. And managed to secure a contract with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And this was like some little foreigner that just didn't believe in herself. And over that period, I really, I don't know how, but I just did it, and I did it well. And that was the beginning of me thinking, yes, I can do this. And I think a lot of people, that's not unusual. My story is not unusual. It's really what we all have to experience in life. And when we start without that evidence, without that belief, we struggle a lot and we suffer a lot.
Yeah, so I huge respect for you to study in a foreign language and do so well, particularly with PwC. And you might not know this, Kevin, but I think as we're recording this, a former guest, albeit temporary, on my 60th, if you recall, Veronica Nishtik, she basically has just finished her exams with PwC. So, to become a sort of a chartered accountant. So basically, she's doing extraordinarily well with them. So we wish her well. But what a fantastic! I'm sorry, she's Polish. So basically, it's quite a challenge to learn and pass exams in English when that's not your first language, and it really is a testament to you. But this whole idea of coaching people and this mixture of business and shall we say, I don't really want to call it life because it's got almost like a bad rap, but it is about it's coaching the individual. And I know we would dress it up as mindset and all kinds of other things, but at the end of the day, is that what you prefer, the sort of personal thing or the business thing?
I like them both combined because together they're really powerful. I think the basic premise behind my book and what drove me to write it is, what's the point in succeeding if we're not enjoying the journey and feeling good about ourselves?
Right.
And so to me, I share with you, Graham, some of the skepticism. And even one of the biggest barriers I had to overcome as I was doing this is acknowledging that I was writing this book that a lot of people might say, oh, this is a self-help book. And I don't believe it is, because self-help books is just something that you read that may inspire you, but it's about somebody else. It's about a recipe or a method that worked for someone else. And what I do in my method of mentoring and also in the book is say, okay, I'll give you almost, imagine you're at university and you've missed one of the lessons and one of your peers say, here's my notes from session. So you take my notes, and in that I throw in a lot of personal stories that people tell me they're a lot of fun, and some of them are very intimate. But I also give people exercises so that they can actually look at that topic and think, how does this stuff that Susana's telling me about, how does this fit into my life, into my circumstances? Because that's where the answers come from. And if I look at, or if I think about all the mentoring that I do, sometimes, especially people, when they've never done it, they don't know what to expect. And every process is different. And I always say, I don't have a magic wand. I can't give you my experience. What I can do, though, is prod you a little bit and help you find a way to ask the right questions to yourself. And it's quite a beautiful process, actually, because I can't teach Kevin or you or anyone anything. It's not a one-directional thing. But when you put it all in a bag, it's very interesting how that the mere reading the pages or listening to this podcast or having the conversation can prompt that personal insight that we all have within us. And if we go to the example of my personal story when I was young, or this lady that you've mentioned from Poland, I do genuinely believe that we all have fantastic potential, but we haven't always had the opportunity to scratch under the surface to acknowledge that. Yeah,
it's okay. Why do they find you initially? I mean, the state that they're in, it can't be they've not got stasis in their lives. They've not got this, perfectly nice thing that's going on in their lives. They're coming to you with something in their minds that says something's missing, there's a block missing, there's something that's not quite going right or right enough. And then they'll find you. I mean, first of all, how do you diagnose what's missing or what's wrong? I mean, presumably by listening, but apart from anything else, how would you know that is the thing and not something else way behind that?
First of all, it's not my job to diagnose anything.
Okay.
Sounding board, right? But of course, my intuition and my experience helps me find almost like the buttons that we can press together. So I always start mentoring with a self-assessment evaluation that people do. So they answer a number of questions that cover all of the areas that I consider important in development. So that goes from your
work. That's not diagnosis then?
But not me. Them.
Oh, yeah, they're self-diagnosing.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So they answer all these questions, and what you end up is with a picture that has 4 territories. So the environment, development, the personal well-being, and also aspirations, motivations, that kind of thing. Yeah. And there are topics within that score really highly. Perfect. There are topics that score really poorly. So that's how you can start to identify perhaps where is it worth focusing as part of the mentoring process.
Do you ever find anybody that's got like good marks in all 4 quadrants? That'll be Kevin, of course. I mean, he's completely happy.
He's a star pupil. I do, Kevin.
You modelled the whole thing on Kevin. But no.
More likely that Kevin comes along and scores pathetically in all 4 quadrants.
Well, yeah, I suppose it could be both ways, Kevin. But I doubt that for a minute.
I think we can be really balanced and be. I mean, not everyone that comes to me comes with a big headache or a challenge ahead of them. Sometimes people are just looking for growth and continuing to develop, because however much we like to think that we're honest with ourselves and that we take time to reflect, sometimes if you don't have a mentoring process in place, it's hard. We get carried away by life. I call it the hamster wheel. We get on that hamster wheel and keep running. And actually all we need is to step back out.
Yeah.
So if we go back to your question around, does anybody ever score perfectly on everything? Yes, but I think, again, it's not about taking the scores too seriously. What I'm looking for and what the person can find there is the trend. Yeah. Because you could mark yourself really highly on everything, like 8, 9, 10, 8, 9, 10. Well, then focus on the 8, if those are the low scores. If you have perhaps people that are harder on themselves and they're scoring 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, then we'll focus on the 4. So I think one of the lessons for me in life, and also as part of the way I like to do mentoring, is there is no perfect way. There is no single approach. It's all about almost like positioning yourself in a context and navigating it without being too rigid, neither with yourself nor with the person that you have in front of you.
A previous guest that we released recently had a big issue in his life, which and basically you could tell that it's still going through, but basically he got some advice, and some of the people advising him were kind of saying, well, tell me how you, they were kind of asking him to solve his own problem, sort of thing. And what he really wanted is somebody to sort of direct him. But in the end, it seemed that the consultant who said, tell me about your life, tell me what's actually happening. Now, what the heck's wrong with you? It really helped him pivot to a different and more positive place. Is there something about getting the coachee, if you like, or I'm not sure what you mentee, I suppose. Is there something about getting the mentee to talk about themselves? Is that the thing that is really helpful, the most helpful thing to you?
Yes and no. I think first I'd like to make clarify something. I think in my opinion, there's a big difference between coaching and mentoring. Right. Coaching, when you're a trained coach, you follow a method, and that method is, as a coach, you're purely facilitating somebody's process. You're asking questions, probing questions. So you're not supposed, as a coach, to put anything from your own judgments, mindset, experience into the process. Whereas mentoring, and that's why I like doing it, you can find that halfway house that you're talking about, Graham, of allowing people to find their own answers. But actually, if it's pretty obvious, just throwing in a sort of like when you're drowning at sea and you're thrown in a floating device. And that's what, so sometimes when I'm talking to one of my mentees, it's pretty clear what the issue is to me, because I have experience. So it's not that I say this is wrong with you, but through the conversation, that topic comes onto the table. And then sometimes I'm a little bit mean, and I say that at the beginning when we're setting up the contest. I may tell you things that make you feel pretty uncomfortable that you don't like.
Well, that's if I was doing your job, then that would be the sort of de facto standard, wouldn't it? Really, I don't think I can get through a meeting without being slightly.
I can tell, Graham, I've only just met you, but definitely there is nothing wrong with poking people in the eye if actually what the reaction is turns out to get them to think and move. So again, in response to your question,
don't give the secrets away. I'd rather be this sort of person, but no, seriously, it's a really good point.
No, but it's not the talking about themselves that I think is the key to doing this. And sometimes I will stop them when they go down a rabbit hole and say, you're giving me too much information, let's part that and we'll continue. No, it's not about the talking about oneself. It's about taking time to reflect and think about things that we don't often do.
And there is a connection between this personal and the business. So heal the personal, or at least improve the personal, improve the business. Is that a causal link that you found with your clients?
Absolutely, because I do believe, I have experienced it myself, and when I talk to my mentees, I always like to keep in touch after we finish the mentoring process. I think they're more empowered. And I'll give you an example. One of my zero readers, she was about to hand in her notice, and this is not a mentee but a zero reader, but in effect is someone that read the book before it's published. But I aim to achieve the same thing, and she had written her resignation letter. And as a consequence of reading the book and thinking about his situation and doing some of the exercises, she thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. I'll try to face this conflict face on, because if not, I can resign. And she did. And she's still employed. She hasn't resigned, and she's getting on much better with her job and her manager.
Right.
So in answer to your question, yes, dealing with her personal conflicts and situation helped her empower herself and do a better job. And therefore, inevitably, that will lead to better results in the workplace. I have no doubt about that.
Wow.
Now, Susana, when you're mentoring, it's usually because your background is qualifying as an accountant, becoming a CFO, or generally mentoring CFOs. But is that who the book's aimed at? Is the book aimed at you mentoring?
Because you, Kevin, you know me through my Grow CFO arena, and in that arena, I do mentor people that grow in aspiring finance professionals. But in my other facets, I do mentor all sorts of people. So people that work in other types of organizations, for instance, engineers. At the moment, I'm mentoring a urologist, a doctor that has a couple of clinics, and I'm mentoring him through his personal development process as a leader of a business, and also some of the topics around the strategy of how he does certain things in the business. So no, it's aimed. This book is aimed at, I think of my son, for instance, who's starting his new job after finishing university in 2 weeks in London. I'm so happy for him. Super bright young person, full of technical skills, but really he doesn't know a lot about how to tackle the workplace. So that'd be my target audience. Or my niece, who she's in her 30s, she's just been promoted to have a team under her. Very good, very bright, overwhelmed by having to take on a team, for instance. So it doesn't matter what your technical expertise is. It's more for people that have to get out there and relate in the workplace and build on all the skills that we don't necessarily learn at university or even some of the traditional syllabuses.
Are there, I hesitate to use this word, but cultural differences in terms of how you go about your job in Spain, for instance, than as compared to the UK?
A little bit, but not really. I think I'm quite unapologetic about, I am Susana, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and I try my best. And if sometimes I may say the wrong word, and if there is, in England, for instance, now there's a lot more care around some of the language we use, to use chairperson instead of chairman, for instance. If I put my foot in it, someone will forgive me because they know me, and there's no ill intention within that. So there's subtle differences, but I would ignore them.
My sort of status is that to call somebody chairman just because I want to call them chairman, I chair is something you sit on, but it just, what can I say? There might be people writing letters into Kevin now saying sack him, whatever you do, get rid of him. He said chairman on. He said chairman on a podcast. He said it several times on a podcast.
I know. Sorry, I dropped you in it. You can blame me, Graham.
No. I do my own. I do my own fair share of triggering, but no. So I do. I mean, I don't know whether your market's actually expanding based on that sort of triggering point, because people do get so offended. Now, I don't think you're necessarily addressing that necessarily as a market, but does it somehow get into the sort of psyche that gets people so wound up? I don't know.
That is a perfect example of some of the perhaps topics I might cover in a mentoring session, and I think a couple of chapters in the book deal with this. When we're riled up by something, like you just did a perfect example of being worked up by people being annoyed about using the word chairperson, the word is irrelevant. Really, what's important is how do you interpret that situation and how do you react to it according to what's needed and what's the optimal way of doing it.
Yeah.
And because we all go into default mode, we have buttons, personal buttons, and your button is the chairperson. Kevin's button might be somebody, I don't know, no turning up on time, or my button might be a very aggressive personality style. We all have our buttons. So finding them, and this is what the book is aimed to help people do, and also mentoring, if we know our own buttons, if we know what are the things that trigger us into those automatic behaviors, wow, suddenly we gain perspective. And with that perspective, we gain control, and we gain a sense of calmness and peace that it's very powerful, Graham.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to go into the details, but recently I was in a meeting of some charity trustees, and I had the awkward position of having to bring up something that was awkward for another trustee, and and it was managed by the board in an appropriate way. But the point is, I was quite nervous prior to that meeting about the impact it would make on the other person, but also the requirement that I had to actually make the point. So it was quite a conflict. I've got to say beforehand, I was quite what's the right word? Not nervous, but concerned that we've dealt with the issues and not the personalities. But it was, yeah.
You need to read chapter 2 and 3 of the book.
Okay. Well, Kevin's probably ahead of me. He'll have a PDF version of it somewhere.
This is the whole point, Graham. And there's you in that situation, with all the grey hairs that have dropped out. All the experience. You're worried about it. Now, as Susana said, we learn at school, at university, we learn technical stuff. And we've all done O-levels, A-levels, or Spanish equivalent of them, got university degree, and in my case, economics and accounting. Susana mentioned the urologist, very, very bright person, would need to have got some incredible results just to get to university, then qualify in medicine, learn all about that specialism. How much time in any of this training goes into running a business, managing the team around you, doing the right things on a board of directors or any sort of committee? And let's face it, you end up working in teams and committees a long time before you get senior and board level. I just think this book is so relevant to that post-university, not quite into senior management job.
I agree, but also even grey hairs, and boldies, if I may use that expression, Graham.
Oh, I'm so triggered by that.
Some zero readers. I've had at least 25 zero readers. I'm very comfortable that I've done my work in terms of trying to make sure it's the right manuscript. And quite a few of them have been people of our age.
Yeah. And
even them, they have found insights. Like one of them, she said, one of the exercises that I propose in the book encourages people to identify the physical sensation we have before some of our triggers, some of our default reaction. No?
Yeah.
And one of my zero readers said, you know what, I did that chapter. I've now finally learned to bite my lip because I noticed, it's true, it's just, I noticed when I'm going into that impatient mode and triggering mode, I recognize it and I stopped doing it.
That's what happens at
somebody of our age, not somebody 25 years old.
If that, I think all she'll do is just store it up and then she'll blow. She'll go postal, as the Americans say. But basically, far easier just to let it out. This is what's happened at Manchester United, of course, because they're all biting the lip, and so they're instead of really celebrating a goal, they'll get the cameras out and film what might be happening on this. And somebody did one of these memes, is it or whatever, on Twitter or whatever it was, and who did the Leeds United supporters who were like going crazy. And basically unbelievable joy at the goal that won the game, versus the Man United fans with their iPhones out, and it was like it was almost sanitized versus the essence of, and I think my default, without getting too football-y, is to let it out.
That's healthy. I totally agree.
Because then you're not bottling it. However, I do understand in the situation that I was in, I was kind of biting my lip to preserve, if you like, the face of the other person, but trying to address the behaviors that were brought up by the thing that I was talking about. So basically, it was difficult, and yeah, I'll be very happy to. I suppose it would be plus readers, wouldn't it? Because you call them 0 readers. I'll be 1 reader.
Yes, I don't know. It's the expression that you use for people that read a book before it's published to help.
Never heard of that before.
Process.
Have you heard of that, Kevin? 0 readers? Because
only because I've spoken to Susana about it before.
Oh. But it's such a clever phrase, isn't it? Because
it's such a clever concept, and I'll tell you something that I think is really interesting, how intuition can help us in that. This is my first book. I really don't have the foggiest clue how to go about it, and I've learned along the way. And when I finished writing the book back in March, it's a long time ago, I thought, how can I publish this without anybody reading it? That would be pointless. So I thought, I'll get some people to read it. And as I continued to explore, I then realized this is something professional writers do. They get people to read their books and give them feedback and errors, and it adds to the quality of the final result, because what's the point of putting all this effort if then perhaps I'm just not landing the idea well enough, or one of the things I say upset Graham when he reads it. You know what I mean? It's
don't have me as a 0 reader. You'll be there all damn year doing it.
As well, it's about accepting. And I've had lots of great feedback, but also a lot of constructive feedback. Some of which I have adapted and changed. And some of it I said, no, I can live with not pleasing everyone, because then you lose the essence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kevin?
So, Susana, the book is called I Wish I'd Known. But now that you're sitting here having written the book, what do you wish you'd known the day you first sat down to write the first word?
Well, I'm glad I didn't know, because if I had known, I would have perhaps thought twice about it. Because in hindsight, I didn't set out to write one book. I've really written 2, because I'm publishing it in both languages. And it's and writing the book is the easy part. People think that writing is difficult, but it isn't. That's easy when you're expressing yourself, when you're full of inspiration, when you want to share your ideas or whether it's fiction or not. That's the easy part. But the laboriousness of 0 readers, correcting, having a professional editing process as well to make sure that it's a good manuscript, thinking about how do you get to your target audience? How do you then get it out there? So there's an enormous amount of work that I wish I had known, but probably it's better that I didn't. And in fact, again, I think this is something that is a good example of how development works in life and in the workplace. When we don't know everything, it's a good thing, because that innocence sometimes can lead us down a path that we will, of course, we'll find obstacles, and we will have headaches, and perhaps we'd wish at times we had known, where in fact it's all for the right reason. It all has the right ending, the right result of us growing and developing into who we are right now.
If you had to think back over the last, I don't know, 10, 20, 50 people who you've been a mentor to, and you said to yourself, okay, let me just do a little tick box of all the things that are recurring, what would be the top 3 things that recurred most often in terms of the things that you mentored on? Okay.
If we part the sort of technical topics aside, because that vary depending on the type of business and the profession. Yeah. If we focus on the personal side, the top has to be self-attitude. So how we talk to ourselves. Some people, and again, there's a chapter in the book around that. Some people might talk to themselves, bringing them down, thinking, oh, you're just not worth it, you can't do it, it's going to be bad. Other people are like, you need to do this or else. It's almost like, so those I call them the personalities of our ego, the different like actors that accompany us. That has to be at the top, because it's quite amazing to observe that we're not always aware of that until you start talking about it and acknowledging it. And suddenly the beautiful thing is when we do acknowledge that, it's actually surprisingly easy to step back and say, okay, I hear what you say, but I'll get on with my life, thanks. So I think that's a massive thing. The other thing is around people, we tend to go into reactive mode and saying yes. So we get into that hamster wheel. We're super busy. We can't keep up with the job, but we don't often stop to say, okay, I have a choice here to whether to go to that meeting, whether to think about delegating, whether to say no, whether to reach for help. So all those, when we're into automatic mode, we don't always realize. And again, simple things that can have a massive impact on how somebody manages their day-to-day activities. And the third one, you asked me for 3. I think the third one, it's a little bit around, it depends on the topic, but I think it's looking for instance, this mentoring session I had last week was around this person that has, like all of us, a lot of time, a lot of challenges with time, too many things to do, too little time, always rushing. So taking time to break things down into pieces. So in this case was around looking for what we call time black holes. So looking at the work schedule, at the personal schedule, and at the social schedule, I'm finding things in there that were draining his time in this instance. But in another scenario, it might be looking at your to-do list at work. So breaking things down into pieces can make it a lot more manageable in terms of seeing what are the things that you need to adjust in order to make progress to overcome that challenge that you have.
I did some research on you before this interview, and I
did some research.
The normal amount. But basically, the first, because it got to the first line of this thing that I'm staring at here. The picture doesn't do you justice, by the way. I think you need to do a different picture. But anyway, this is from the Grow CFO site, and on it there it says Susana firmly believes in the quote, "We are owners of our destiny. We are captains of our soul." Now, if anybody's listening to this, which I'm sure there'll be plenty, just think back over the last sort of 30 minutes or so, and Susana's talked to that probably as much as anything. It's about being owner of your destiny and the ingredients that need to go into that. So fix yourself, fix your business sort of thing. Captains of our soul. I love that phrase.
I do too.
and I don't know, you perhaps, it's a quote. So
it's a quote by Churchill, I believe.
Ah, right. Well, yes.
No, I didn't pick anyone. He knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. And what a fantastic phrase. Captains of our soul. And that's actually what you've been talking about. That's effectively it's what's ingrained into your mentoring style, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Graham, I can't thank you enough. I think you've sort of brought it all together beautifully without me knowing. So
no, I'm quite good at that. Anybody who wants me for a book tour or something like that, get in touch. No, I'm only kidding. But no, seriously, no, Susana, I mean, it's quite clear why Kevin gets on well with you, because clearly he needs to improve himself and he just wants to be around you on a regular basis. But and it's rubbing off because he's got better and better over time, I've got to say, a bit like a fine wine.
Thank you. Kevin we always have such fun when we have discussions, don't we, Kevin? And I think ultimately, in a way, it's because we don't take them too seriously, and we bring those two aspects, the professional experience and also ourselves, onto the conversation, and that is beautiful.
I think that's the essence of how we get along with folk, isn't it, Kevin? Because we certainly don't take ourselves too seriously. Susana, thank you so much for being on the Next 100 Days podcast. Graham,
it has been my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to continuing to listen to your podcast.
Thank you.
So, Graham, this sounds like a really, really useful book for a lot of people.
Remind me, do you remember the title? I've got this mental blank.
I wish I had known.
Ah, there you are, you see. It's a bit of a
you wish you'd known that.
I wish I'd known that, you see. There you are. So I wish I had known. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the link to the book, which actually comes out when we release the podcast, it comes out the very next day. So you'll be able to sort of be one of the very first, if you've listened to the podcast, like what you've heard from Susana, then you basically can just click onto the link within the podcast show notes and go and buy the book. And I think you'll find it a very, very good read. It looks like I've got to read, is it chapters 2 and 3, Kevin?
Chapters 2 and 3, yeah. But you might have caught during the recording, Susana talked about having written 2 books. That's because there are 2 books released tomorrow. One's in English and one's in Spanish. So I think this is the first time we've ever recorded somebody who has written a book in 2 languages. And we never actually asked Susana on the show about the complications of doing that. But what it means is that basically she's covered most of the globe as a potential audience here. Yeah. Anybody English speaking, anybody Spanish speaking as a first language. So we'll put the link to both versions of the book. So if you really fancy reading the Spanish copy,
just make sure
Graham's going to do, you can do that.
Yeah, make sure you buy the right book. If I was to get the Spanish one, it'd be a bit of a waste on me. But nonetheless, there was a lot of useful sort of thinking that went on there about being the captain of your soul, etc., and the things that you can do to figure out how you can sort of, I don't know, not just improve yourself, but improve the way you are with others, that can help your business and actually earn more money for you in the longer term. So I think it's been an extremely useful podcast, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, Kevin.
Yeah, Graham, I thoroughly enjoyed chatting to Susana, and I've done several podcasts with her on the Grow CFO show, but they've all been very different to the one that we've recorded today, and it's been thoroughly enjoyable.
It's the next 100 days format, Kevin. Probably it's
probably is, Graham.
Yeah, we certainly don't take ourselves too serious. Although it sounds like you didn't in the other podcasts as well. So today I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.